Hello everybody, my name is Martin and with me here is Andrew Hoefling. Hello.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, can you introduce yourself a little bit so that people know who you are?
Yeah, as Martin said, my name is Andrew Hoefling. I am a mobile developer. Live in upstate New York, near Lake Ontario, if you know where that is. And I right now I work for a company called File on Queue. We build mobile apps focusing on inventory management systems, and what else do I do? I got a blog that I run for that. I just did an intro to Uno platform, getting started series. I just wrapped up end of last week, which kind of focused on some of the basics. And I enjoy doing open source development.
Mm-hmm. That's great because that's why we're here to actually learn about development of Uno platform and learn about how we can contribute to Uno platform as well. So that's perfect because that's what we like, because the contributions from the community are very important for Uno platform and uh, actually help us to bring it forward. So what we will look into today is basically setup for the dev environment overall so that you can develop applications or develop not only applications but actually contribute to Uno platform, and we will see how to set things up and get the samples running and so on. All right, so let's probably start with the basics, like how did you get into this state which you have on your PC now?
All right. So how do we get the where are we starting right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've done so far is I've gone to let me open up the browser. Oh, perfect. It's on the right window. Uh, so I went right over to GitHub here to Uno platform slash Uno, got the repository and cloned the latest to just ensure that we are on the latest. We're all up to date. And while we're here, what I've done is I've opened up the Uno platform's UI Windows only solution to kind of let's because I wanted to just get Uno platform running on
Mm-hmm.
Windows before I started looking at the other platforms, which introduce more moving parts. I always like to
Yeah.
reduce my moving parts when I'm getting started with anything.
Yeah.
And full disclaimer to anyone watching here. I have made one Uno platform contribution. I did not get the solution to build, and this was during Hacktoberfest last year. So I have just as much of experience with this as anyone else in the room. Uh, and when I first loaded up Uno platform, right before we got on stream, it actually had me install some missing components for Visual
Yeah.
Studios. I believe I had a couple of Windows SDKs missing and some Node package, needed some stuff with Node.js installed for WebAssembly. But other than that, this is a very clean version of Visual Studio. Martin, unless there's anything you want to show, I think the first thing I was just going to do is try building the
Uh,
solution here.
Actually, one thing I would do before we start is if you go back to the GitHub page, you actually cloned the main repository, but it would
Yes.
be useful to fork it first and then clone the fork instead, because you will work in your fork, implement some feature, and then do a pull request into the main repo. So
Absolutely. So let's go do that as we see all
yeah,
the other things
yeah,
there.
we have it. So if you clone this one, and then we will update it to the latest master to have it in sync. So
I might
because
be a little bit behind
yeah,
here. Actually, let's go fix that real quick.
yeah,
Because I like showing Git commands for people that might not be familiar with how to fix that. So if I do remote, I only have the origin. I can check the actual path with that with the dash V command. So let's go and add my fork.
I actually have a question here in chat. So the question is, when will Uno support the keyboard focus visual cues on WebAssembly? And this is something we are definitely working on. I don't have the exact timeline, but we will have to first implement the visual focus cues themselves, and then add the keyboard support for moving focus from one element to another. So cannot say exactly, but it definitely will be happening quite soon, as is a priority for accessibility reasons and so on. Right. Good. So yeah.
So what I did with my local repository is I got a fork. So when I need to fix stuff when I'm that far behind, I'll make sure that my master main branch, so in this case master, we just checked, is all up to date. It's upstream is set to origin, but what I can do here is I can do push fork master. So I'm telling it the remote what branch, and if I do -f, that's going to force my fork to be up to date with what I have locally, which is the same thing here. So if I do refresh this, there we go. Now it says my branch is even. So that's a relatively easy way to get stuff in sync. When I do open source development, it's awful what happens because my fork always gets out of sync, and I'm always my local repository is always in sync because I'm always pulling from origin and not pushing. And if you ever find yourself in that position, just push yourself up. And usually they say don't use the -f key because that's going to erase all of your history there. But in this case, I never commit code directly to the master branch in my forked repository. I always create a new branch from there. So that's kind of it's a carbon copy of it. So that's, in that case, it is safe to do that -f command. But all right, we have our fork. So I'm just going to go create a new branch, and we're going to call this the Andrew branch. Yeah. So in case I want to commit anything.
Yeah. Right. So that's good. And so now we're ready, definitely, to actually do the build. So the Windows solution is the simplest one because it contains only the UI toolkit and runtime tests, and then the samples application. So if you go into samples app, that's basically the test suite for all our tests, like UI tests as well as manual testing. So it's an application, a similar thing to what Xamarin Forms, for example, has. They have a testing application that contains several testing pages and pages to test several bugs that they have reported and fixed. So we have the same thing here. It contains UI tests for features as well as test pages for other things. So yeah, it's basically a simple UWP application which has samples. If we go to samples folder,
there it is.
Yeah, so there are unit tests. Actually, this is not interesting. Yeah, you have to go to the UI test shared project. There
it is.
Yeah, okay. So this contains a lot of things, and it's basically structured based on the namespaces. So
gotcha.
Whatever you want to see, you go into that specific namespace, and there are relevant things that are showing that specific feature. So exactly like controls.
That's a big one. All right.
Yeah, that's the biggest one probably, and we will probably be moving many of those to Microsoft UI XAML controls, which is coming up when UI 3 is open source.
Gotcha. Let's look at a button, for example. That should be a simple one.
Yeah, but there is a lot of tests. Basically every possible feature of the UI controls is tested. So
that's good.
We run all those tests during each pull request and after it's merged to master. So we have a protection to see that things don't break when we introduce new features.
Absolutely. Having that type of automation is so critical because we can always, it's very easy to break stuff. So I got a couple questions right out of the gate. So when I first get started on a new project, new open source project, or even for work, the first thing I'm going to do is build it, but I start by checking to see if there's any type of build script that needs to be run in addition. So I'm just going to poke around a little here. That doesn't look like that's something different completely. So if I'm understanding this solution file correctly, and there's no special build script, I should just be able to come up here to build solution, right?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. But what I suggest before, now you're building the whole solution you have opened now, the Windows only. But for UI Toolkit, that's actually a multi-targeted project. If you open it, the CSProj file, if you open it like here, you can see that it has Xamarin Mac, Android, UWP, Xamarin iOS, and .NET Standard. So all of these will be built now, one by one. So it takes longer than you would have to wait. So if you close this completely, close the window, and go into the root folder of the solution.
The root folder of the...
the source, yes. The source folder.
Let's take a look at source.
And if you open it in code, ideally.
What do you want me to bring this one over?
So in there, you should find a cross-targeting...
There it is.
Props, this one. Yeah, so if you make a copy of this one and remove the sample extension.
All right. Before we do that, I just want to point out where this is located. Yeah. So this is, because I just switched editors here. So I'm over in Visual Studio Code. This is opened up at the root Uno folder. So we go into source. And in here, right next to all of our solution files is the cross-targeting override props file. And you said make a copy of this?
Yes, copy of this without the sample extension, just the props. We have a question in the chat. If we too are at least using Prism by Dan Siegel. So you can start.
I've chatted with Dan quite a few times about Prism, and as far as I understand, it is they started supporting it over the summer of this year, so things should work. I have not used it with Uno, so your mileage may vary, but I have been told it should work.
Yeah, it does actually. I tried it, and I'm using Prism at work, so it's a good library.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. All right, so I got the cross-targeting override .props created now. We just copied the sample and removed the .sample. Yeah. So you're saying that, do we need to edit anything in this file?
Yes, down there is a commented out element Uno target framework override. And if you uncomment this
one right here?
Yeah, the whole line, uncommented, and inside of it, you say which platform do you want to actually build. And because we are now targeting Windows only, you can copy the UAP 10 17763. From even there is in the file, there is a sample. If you go back into on the top, there is a list of supported platforms. So for this case, we use Windows, paste it there, and now once you have it there, you should be just building the Windows target.
Perfect. No, that's much easier than going back, because I was going to come back over here and edit this file, and I'll just take a look to confirm. Where's my edit button? There it is, project file. UAP 17763. All that matches up, so that's good.
I actually recommend you to close the solution and reopen it, because Visual Studio doesn't usually like when you change the target platform at runtime. So
I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for just a second while I do that. For people watching, I am using my work computer here, so I don't want you to see all my projects in my window there. And now we can reshare. Here we go. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, you're back.
All right, I'm back. I just closed it and reopened it. Things are loading. But at this point, I should be able to build the solution, and we'll just build the UAP. Okay.
You can confirm that in the output window. You should see only the Windows target being built.
All right, so let's do that. We'll just pin this real quick, and I'll say build solution. Building target framework. Might need to download some NuGets while we're at it. Building target framework right here. So that's good. That's what we want to see.
We don't want to see that second one, that error there.
Failed. That's not what we want to see. You're right. Let's head over to the error window. Ooh, let's not head over to the error window. Let's just read this. Task cannot be loaded from assembly. Source generators could not load file or assembly.
That's quite interesting.
Is that a NuGet problem, or is that just a let's clean and rebuild problem?
Let's suppose it's a clean and rebuild. We'll see.
All right. I'll cancel a few times here until it actually cancels the build.
It never works.
I just keep hitting it sometimes until it starts working. There we go. Looks like it canceled.
Good.
Let's check. Yep, it's not showing up there anymore. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean the whole solution.
Yeah.
Something might have gotten corrupted because I did try build before we updated the proj file there.
Yeah.
So in Xamarin Forms, and I'm going to compare everything to Xamarin Forms because that's where most of my mobile experiences come from. In Xamarin Forms, we run into problems all the time where the bin and obj folder needs to be manually deleted. Is that a problem I should worry about before we run our next build?
Not in this case, I would say, but it does happen sometimes that some things get mixed up there. So when everything else fails, it's something to try, definitely. Yeah, so we're still on this problem. What I'm thinking now is whether this thing has to be doesn't have to be built before with the .NET Standard head. Can you probably let's do this thing. Let's close this whole thing, switch to .NET Standard, and let's build a WebAssembly solution first, because that's a starting point. That's even suggested on the guide tutorial in our docs. So because this Windows solution lacks a lot of parts that's usually built with the other.
Okay, so I'll update that to .NET Standard 2.0, and let me close that solution and reopen it.
Reopen the WebAssembly one.
Open the WebAssembly one. Okay, so let's do that. Open project. So I could bring this window over. Okay, so what I'm doing is I have the WebAssembly, so we want to open this one here.
This one. There is also one for hot reload, but we don't need it right now, so let's go.
We're just trying to build.
Yeah.
All right, and once Visual Studio's loading bar goes away, I will bring that back over.
Dan Siegel is writing that if we need to delete bin obj folders, there is a tweaks extension for Visual Studio by Mats Kirstensen that makes it easier. So
I'm using just a basic build of Visual Studio. I don't have too many extensions. I got the Uno extension, but not too much more is happening here. All right.
Apparently that extension, the tweaks extension, has also a presentation mode, which is good for streaming and presentations. That's also interesting.
That's good to know.
Something to try.
I think I was seeing some people talk about that on Twitter the other day. All right, so what we've done is we got the WASM solution loaded up, and I've updated this to .NET Standard 2.0. And I did that before I opened it, so let's let me tab over. There we go.
I think now it's going to restore some packages, because there's a lot of packages that you probably don't have installed.
Additional projects loaded and unloaded in solution filter. Update solution.
No, that's probably fine. That's just a warning. So it's now loading things.
We're unloading the WASM project.
For some reason. Yeah, now it's restoring. And
I don't see any tasks running now. I think we're good to try a build.
Yeah, let's try a build.
Let's see what happens. I mean, the hardest thing with getting started with any project is doing the actual build portion.
Right.
Just getting the thing to compile.
Exactly.
That's a warning. That's okay.
It's also fine. That's gonna be interesting. The UI tasks. It seems it now built correctly. So I think that was the prerequisite that we needed to have it functional.
So, is there any talks with the development team or on GitHub about having a like a scaffolding build script for first-time developers where they could just clone the project and they could just open up terminal and just type build, and it's like a PowerShell script or something that would then build the .NET standard stuff and then the Windows stuff, so then they could just open up the Visual Studio and have a solution ready to go.
That's not yet there, but that's a good idea probably, because there's a lot of steps that you need to do before you actually build the .NET standard, for example, because you have to create the props file and change it to target.NET standard and so on. So maybe that's something that could be done to make it easier for first timers. But there is a walkthrough for the first time into contributors on the docs. If you go to platform.uno, go there and
Yes. Do this. Platform.uno. There we go.
Right, and there is docs, and in there let's search for it. So it's contributing to Uno probably.
Contributing to Uno.
This one, yes. And then building Uno UI, the fourth entry. So those are the prerequisites, what you need to install for Visual Studio, plus Android SDK. And then actually the steps we did, so changing cross-targeting override, setting .NET standards as a target, and then building the WebAssembly project solution.
Right, okay, so we're over here, yep. Set the build target.
Oh, that's what we did, and now the solution file for WebAssembly or Skia.
That's right, we did not follow the steps. We just went at it, and we missed the .NET Standard 2.0. Okay. Yeah. I'm just gonna put that over there for safekeeping. Let's see what our build's looking like. It's still going.
The first one is longer.
Always longer.
Yeah.
But once we get this built, I figure we can then close the solution and reopen the Windows one again, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Then it should work.
All right.
All right. So in the meantime, you can ask more questions if you want, or if you have some.
Do we have any questions coming in from the chat right now?
No questions so far. We have Francois and Jerome from Uno team in the chat. Hello, hello.
Hello. Nice. Now I got some questions that I'm going to save for later, but I don't think we actually mentioned at the beginning of the stream. But my plan is once we get this building and working, I want to focus on what I know as a Xamarin Forms developer and where are those same concepts, if they are even there, in Uno platform. One of my big questions, which I want to get to once we get a little bit further, is as a Xamarin Forms developer, when I need to go and create a new native control, I might create a shared abstraction class and custom renderers for each of the different platforms. And I understand in Uno, the technique isn't really applicable most of the time because you just grab the different controls and you build out your composite control, if you will, and render that on the screen. But if I wanted to, let's say we had a UWP control that's not implemented in GTK Sharp, for example. And I wanted to understand, how do we get from the WinUI control to the native GTK Sharp control? Where's that bridge, and how do I go and make that type of contribution? And that still might be applicable in my custom application. It might not be a WinUI control, but it might be useful for my team to have an abstracted control that renders the native stuff. And most of the time when I've done Uno development, I've always just liked, well, if I need a native control, I'm just gonna do like a pound if for the platform and just grab that native control. But I still think it's valuable to understand how those things are connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds good. We can get to that when we have it running, and we can see what are the alternatives in Uno to these features from Xamarin Forms.
Okay.
So we now built
perfect.
successfully. That's very good. Actually, last time when we were streaming with Arlo Godfrey, we haven't been able to build the WebAssembly solution for like 1 hour and a half. That was just because we had a long file path issue. So it was very annoying.
Yes. If you notice,
it's always good
everything.
As close to root as possible.
I've ran into that problem many times before. So what I'm doing is I'm reopening the Windows-only solution.
You have to switch to Windows in the cross-targeting.
That's correct. So let's go and do that. So we said UAP. We'll just copy and paste. Save that.
Yep.
I'm going to close my solution now.
Yeah, rather close it.
Multi-targeting. Yep.
For safety reasons.
I believe they are doing some work over Visual Studio to better handle those multi-targeting projects. Mm-hmm. It's not there today, but I know that's something they've been looking at.
Yeah, I hope so, because it's a little annoying when things break just because you don't switch the platform properly or similar. So.
Right. Well, especially with the release of .NET MAUI and .NET 6 comes out towards the end of next year, there's a lot of work going on the tooling side of stuff for multi-targeted CS projects, because they're going to be doing a very similar concept where everything's in the same project.
Right. And I cannot imagine how that's going to be handled. It's going to be very complex, I think.
It's difficult. I've written a handful of complicated Visual Studio extensions, and I don't envy that job. I do not envy that job. Okay, so we're back in the Windows-only solution, and we weren't able to get this to build earlier. So just to recap, we've gone ahead and updated that to the UAP 17763. We got the Windows-only solution, so I'm just going to go and build it.
Let's build it.
Because last time we were seeing an error about here on the screen, and we'll see if we get that error or not.
So far it seems it's building something, so that's good sign.
Good sign.
Last time it failed pretty quickly, so
yes, it did.
I suppose now it's actually building, which would be ideal.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, those are just warnings. I'm okay with warnings.
No. All right. So now it's building the samples app, and when it's built, you will be able to actually run it. But you will have to switch to x86 target, because otherwise you will not have it deployed. So that's fine when it's actually building the x86 version, just that you will have to switch it manually in the top.
Right. I always run into that problem when I'm developing an Uno app, and I go between, let's say, Android and UWP, and having to
it's actually
that. I always forget.
A little bit confusing when you switch to it and nothing happens, and you try to launch it again and again, then you realize you have to switch to a target platform. So it would be better if any CPU was supported in UWP, but what can you do?
One day.
I hope that they will be bringing in .NET 5 or probably 6 support in the future to UWP. We have to wait for that probably.
So if you didn't guess, today's going to be a lot of waiting for builds.
That's the first build. Next time's gonna be faster.
I think it was, when was this? This must have been spring of last year. It was when I first started doing live streaming, which I haven't done since spring of last year. But my first live stream, I was building the base class library to .NET. And on my little Surface Book 2 that I'm using today, it took me about 5 minutes to build. Oh. And on stream, it took me about 20 minutes to build. So when I was doing the stream, I was very careful. Like, okay, we made the change here and here, and the people in the channel, like, all right, is there anything else before we hit the build? Because we're gonna need to take like a 20-minute break. And then I took a break, walked away for 15 minutes, came back, and people were still hanging out in the Twitch channel because everyone was interested on the stuff I was working on. But yeah, those are long builds. This is not too bad.
This is fine. Android build is much worse.
All right.
So let's switch the sample set as the target.
Perfect. Okay, so
let's go.
Let's go.
Jerome is saying that C#9 code generators are proving very interesting for the build time. He actually did some changes that improved the build time significantly, just thanks to those C#9 code gen features. So it's going to be very interesting.
Are those using the Roslyn generators then?
Probably, I think so. It's this is C#9 code gen. I haven't used it, so probably he will provide more. It's the same generation code. Yeah, he's writing about it right now, so we'll probably chime in more info.
Cool.
So we are now in the sample set. So this is interesting because it's now running on UWP. So that's the home of the UWP platform is Windows, and so the features that are now there should work because it's the source from which we are basically taking the APIs and behavior. So if you go into any of those categories, you can then see various tests for various features. So if you pick something, you should see probably the change on the top, and the flyout is there.
Cool.
Yeah, so basically this then runs under UI testing on Xamarin Android and iOS, and WebAssembly using the Chromium WebDriver, and verifies that the behavior of controls is correct. So
I'm just poking around a little.
Various things, everything that you can think about in those controls is there, and so the UI tests are very useful there.
Yes, I have a very close relationship with flyouts. It's part of the pop-up control implementation for Xamarin Forms.
Yeah, so Jerome is confirming that the Uno source gen and Roslyn generators are both based on Roslyn APIs.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. What else do I want to look at? Let's look at a menu flyout. Let's do menu item quick.
Yeah, so
these are fun. Looking at the sample projects are a lot of fun. Like just seeing what you can do with stuff.
Yeah. It's actually very good for testing of new features. When you implement a new feature, like I did for the various sensors, I first did the UWP version, tested that, confirmed how it actually works, and then did the other platforms and then compared to see if it behaves the same way. So this is very helpful. Like always start with a sample page, and based on that, then do the other platforms and see if it actually matches.
So this doesn't look like it's loading for the menu file.
Down there is the 3 dots on the right side. I think that's probably it. I'm not sure what this sample actually does or tests.
Oh,
It's
it's probably this.
probably
Okay.
that. Mm.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, there we go. Yep, yep. It's samples. It's not necessarily the most user-friendly.
Yeah, that's not the goal.
Let's look at pop-ups. I like pop-ups. Let's do pop-up simple. That's a pop-up. Cool. Oh, X button
So there's
there.
some logging there, and yeah,
Oh, look at that.
a
He
lot of
knows right where I'm
logging.
clicking. Lots of logging. That's cool. No, this is cool. Like we've spent about 30 minutes tinkering around getting the build to work and then poking around in here, but if I close this, I like how everything's in one place. I can go because it's the Uno UI folder here has all of our platform code and then the sample code, and it's all dependent on the platform code. So this is really easy as a new developer to Uno to come in and see what's going on and being able to test stuff, because all I would need to do is if I wanted to add a new control, I can just add it into the sample project and then start implementing it and see
Yeah,
how that goes.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. It's best to start with this platform-specific solution because then you remove the clutter of all the other platforms and you can focus
Right.
on just one. And actually, UWP has some Uno platform code as well. If you go to the Uno UI toolkit, that's actually available on Windows. And there are some features, some useful things that you can use on Windows as well. For example, the visible bounce padding, that's there to accommodate for notch supporting devices. And actually, when you use it in XAML, you have to have it available on Windows as well. So it's here in this toolkit project so that the API is there, even though it doesn't actually do anything because Windows devices don't have notch. But it then provides a notch functionality for Android and iOS.
Gotcha. All right. Cool. So do we want to try doing the WebAssembly project next?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. I'm just gonna pull this off screen for a second. We'll get that
Again,
loaded up.
just close it because we'll have to switch the platform.
Yep. And we said platform's gonna be net standard then, right?
Yes. And that's interesting because .NET Standard is not only for WebAssembly but also for SKIA targets. So
Okay.
that means that there are two different solutions there. If you go, there is WebAssembly and there is then Uno SKIA only, and both of these are for the .NET Standard target.
Okay, SKIA only. Okay.
So let's
We'll
start with
do,
WebAssembly and then we will get to SKIA.
All right.
Okay. Jerome is asking if you're running on Windows machine directly or a Mac through Parallels. And I think you're on Windows directly, right?
I'm working on a Windows machine directly. This is a Surface Book 2. So it's not the most powerful thing, but it is powerful enough.
That's good.
All right.
So this is a little bit bigger now. As you can see,
Yes.
there's a lot of new things. So we can go through those one by one once it loads.
Right. And I assume it needs to be bigger because UWP, we're relying on the Microsoft implementation
Exactly.
for WebAssembly and all the other platforms. The Uno team has gone and built their own implementation using the UWP spec.
Right, right.
We'll give that a minute to stop yelling at us. Uh-oh, I clicked something. Shouldn't have done that.
If you remember in Windows 95 or such, when the things were loading, you were clicking and it actually improved them.
Oops.
Made it faster. Yeah, just wait for it. It was probably gonna work.
We'll give it a second.
Give it a chance.
I'm usually very impatient. Like, no, close it. We're starting over. We're done. Well, the WASM stuff's really cool. I've been tinkering around with it recently. and I'll give myself my shameless plug of one of the things that I'm excited about that I've been doing with Wasium. So I do a lot of open source contributions to the DNN platform, formerly known as .NET Nuke, which is a CMS and application platform built on system.web and web forms. And
Mm-hmm.
they've done a lot of progress to modernize it. And one of the things that I started doing was their admin experience allows you to pretty much use any type of development technique that you want as long as it calls into the necessary web API routes to communicate with your database and such. So I thought, well, I could just build my apps in XAML using Uno platform and then use WebAssembly and just inject that into the admin page using an iframe, and
Mm-hmm.
then the Uno app could then communicate with the web API. So
Yeah.
it was actually really cool when I put it all together, and it just worked.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it has to use an iframe, but I was able to get this working nicely inside of a web forms project.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I'm trying to build my own block block system, and for the admin environment, I probably will go for Uno platform because it's gonna be much easier than doing the JavaScript and stuff.
And that was my art. That was my argument for doing it. Like, well, on a typical page inside of a website, I probably won't use Wasium, whether it's Uno or Blazor, because you got to download the mono libraries and everything, and that could be significant, especially if you're talking about somebody that's navigating to your site on like a mobile device with poor
Right.
connectivity. But in an admin experience area where it's going to be only open by your power user or just yourself, and it's going to be on a desktop or a laptop, so you don't need to worry about screen size as much. um, Doing it in Uno makes a lot of sense to me. And the thing that I find really intriguing with it is once I do that for the stuff that I was doing in DNN and for your thing, I could now very easily take that and turn it into an iOS or
Right.
Android app so I can manage my website from anywhere and don't need to be on the actual
Exactly.
site itself.
That's super useful. Yeah. So you
All
have
right.
one application everywhere. So that's a value proposition for Uno.
Yes. Okay. So we got the Wazian project loaded up. So I'm just
Oh,
going to
Jerome
poke
is
around.
actually saying that a new preview of Visual Studio is out just now. So
Ooh.
16.8
I,
preview 5.
if I was on my other computer, I would download it, but this is the work computer, and we're not touching Visual Studio. Last time I touched it, I broke our core project because it wouldn't build on the newer version. So we're gonna stay put right now. Okay, so just poking around a little bit
Mm-hmm.
here. Like you said, we have a lot more. We got our
Like
sample
the Uno
project.
UI folder is the core of everything.
Right.
So you can see there the generators. Those are various code generators in the this folder, and tasks that are run when you build Uno platform application. Then you have
Oh, are these like the MS Build
yeah,
tasks
so
then?
so yeah, MS Build tasks and various things.
Okay.
So it's writing the resources when you have image assets, for example, and for example, uh, uh, localization strings and so on. Right? There's a lot of things going on there.
This stuff's really cool. I don't know who came up with the Uno UI build stuff, but I need to give a shout out to whoever did it because the other day I was looking through exactly what happens when you build like a Wazium project and how it generates that distribution folder inside your
Mm-hmm.
bin debug folder, and you could pretty much copy that entire folder out and drop it into your website. And as someone that's been doing the Uno Wazium for a little bit now, like, well, that's kind of trivial, but I was looking at some of the XML MS build scripts that get generated with Uno stuff, and it's really impressive to have all of that integrated, and it's very well done. I was very impressed when I was looking through it and seeing exactly how all that stuff goes. So I know a lot of developers don't really care too much for the build stuff, but to have all that just work
Yeah.
so seamlessly, it's so slick. I
It's
like
quite
it a lot.
magical actually. When, for
Yes.
example, for the assets, for the image assets, it automatically puts the right images into the right scaling folders on specific platforms. So if you have Android, it goes into the HDPI and HDPI and so on automatically, so you don't have to care about it. So it's superb.
Oh, it's just I like build stuff. It's just the automation that I've seen in Uno is just, it's a very high standard. Okay. So looking through the rest of these, so this, all of this code here is the different implementations for the UWP spec for Wazoo.
Yes.
Okay. So is there anything in particular that we could,
like the most important projects are the Uno WebAssembly and then Uno UI WebAssembly. Those two are the ones that contain the actual code of Uno platform. Also, there's a Uno Foundation.WebAssembly. That's the but basically, the Uno Foundation is a projection of Windows Foundation libraries. Okay. Then you have Uno WebAssembly, it's a projection of the non-UI things. And then Uno UI is a projection of the XAML related, basically what Microsoft UI XAML is now doing for WinUI. So these are like the system ones, like the devices, sensors, networking, and so on.
Well, this is good. This is actually very familiar.
Yeah, because those are the namespaces that you use when you build UWP. So if you go to, for example, application model, and there is, for example, email, and in that you will find email manager. That's exactly the same namespace as in Windows. So you have windows.applicationmodel.email.email manager. Yeah, that's how Uno platform works. It actually has the same namespaces. So when you build the other platforms, it just targets Uno instead of Windows runtime.
Gotcha. All that stuff is exactly the same right there.
Yeah. So there are some shared files, but there are also some platform specific. If you go to Email Manager iOS. So this is iOS specific code. There, it's now showing up like this because you have .NET Standard as the target. But
right.
Yeah, this
we still see it.
Yeah, platform specific code.
Cool. All right, now so is this project here Uno Wasm? That's probably just .NET Standard. Yes, it is. Okay, so one contributing to Uno, if I wanted to write, in this case, iOS specific code, is it considered best practice to create its own partial class using the .ios and then just putting the £if at the top of the file?
So it depends. If the feature can be written using the .NET frameworks base APIs, and you don't have to use anything platform specific, you can usually write it directly in the shared file. You can see that if you go in the Uno WASM folder to storage, and there should be file.io. File.io in the middle. This one. So this is completely cross-platform because it's dependent only on the system IO APIs. If you go down to the private parts, in the private methods, you can see it's just using stream reader, and so on.
Right, and that's implemented across the board.
So you don't have to care about it. You just write the shared code in one file.
Gotcha.
But for most features like that are specific and depend on hardware specific features like sensors, then you have to have some shared code and then some platform specific. If you go to devices folder in the
which one?
Devices. If you go up
devices,
devices, and there it is. For example, sensors. And there is, for example, accelerometer. So if you go to accelerometer, there is some shared code that's shared by all the platforms. And from this code, you actually call some partial methods or some methods which are not implemented in this file, but are implemented in the platform-specific one. So
Right.
in accelerometer.wasm, you should see the actual implementation of some of those methods that were called in the shared file. So these are basically the platform specifics.
Right.
So when you're implementing a new feature, you usually start with the shared file and then implement the platform specific parts of the code in the partial classes. And actually the #if header is not even needed, as Uno platform builds based on those file extensions. So if you have something.wasm.cs, it's going to be compiled only for WebAssembly.
Gotcha. And that was kind of that. It was a very leading question because I've seen that as a commonplace in the .NET ecosystem. Is if you do .wasm.cs, there's usually some type of globbing pattern inside the CS project that will only build that there. And so it sounds like that's it's not necessary to have these up here. But is it recommended for contributions or?
I previously did it, but now I no longer do.
Okay.
It made it clear when you're on different platform that you are actually looking at a file that shouldn't be edited in this specific target. Just for the clarity, if you go to iOS, you see that it's all gray, so you shouldn't touch it. But otherwise, it's just convention, and you don't have to use it.
All right. Let's take a look at the UI stuff.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that part. So, what I'm interested in looking at next is let's look at like a text block or a button control.
So you go to the UI folder. That's
there it is. Okay.
The root, and
now the controls folder. That one always gets me.
Right. So UI, XAML, and there is controls then.
Okay. Yeah, this reminds me. So when I did my first contribution last time around, I was looking for the controls folder. I kept going into this folder and this doesn't make sense. What? And I eventually found this folder. So let's go take a look at a button. Buttons seem relatively simple. So the shared code here uses button base. Hold on. So let's go look at the WASM code.
That's radio button. Yeah. Go to the button base because that's probably more of what you want to see. There's a primitive for buttons, and that's going to be more interesting, I think. So again, button base derives from content control, and it's the same hierarchy as on Windows, except for some differences that are in the base, because in Windows you have to derive from dependency object and framework element, or maybe framework element derives from dependency object, but we cannot do it here because the platform specific controls have to derive from the platform specific classes. For example, on iOS, that would be UI view, and so the hierarchy is a little bit different in Uno platform. And the trick is there that the dependency object is not a class, but it's an interface.
You see, but that's the thing I really like about Uno platform is that the dependency object is an interface. It makes it. I was just chatting with some people about this the other day. Having that as an interface makes it easier to unit test the UI rules in custom controls. So when I build a XAML application, I'll usually create some type of composite control that will encapsulate maybe a grid, maybe some stack panels or layouts or whichever one it is. I always forget I think it's panel for UWP, and then I might have some text blocks in there and in a button maybe. But as far as my page is concerned, it's just going to be Andrew's control, and There might be some business rules that are included in that controls code behind. If I and let's say I wire that up to like some bindable properties to make it easy to interact with an MVVM application. One of the things I found very difficult and this is on the Xamarin Form side of stuff, is since that bindable object, which is the equivalent of the dependency object for UWP, is a class. It makes it very difficult to unit test any custom business rules in a complicated composite control. There is the mocking libraries out there, but there are some limitations with that, especially if you're using experimental flags over there. But if that is an interface, now I can mock out that interface very easily, and I can write a series of unit tests that validate the UI rules of any complex composite controls. And that is a really big selling point to me to use Uno platform. Is now, instead of having, let's say you have 100 custom controls in your project, instead of having 100 custom controls that you can't unit test, you can unit test any of those complex UI rules. Because it's still C# at the end of the day. And if it's C#, in my book, you should be unit testing it.
Yeah, that's probably true. And if you go to the trick is that you still have to have some of the properties that are in the dependency object, and that those have to be implemented on all controls which derive from dependency object. And the trick is that Uno platform generates those automatically. If you go up in the folder structure, there is a mixins folder in the root of the project. So above here, mixins. And if you open up mixins folder, in mixins there is another mixins.
Mixins.
Yeah. And so if you click on dependency property mixins, you should be able to see the property. So it's actually generating some of those properties automatically.
Right.
You see, for example, horizontal content alignment, horizontal alignment. Those things are automatically generated when you build a project. And that's pretty important because you have to have those properties there when you... Jerome is saying that the dependency property generator isn't a source generators project. That's a different thing than the mixins.
Okay.
So there should be a source generator folder somewhere. I'm not sure where exactly right now. If you scroll up a little bit, in the generators, source generators, and there is dependency object, this one. Yeah, then so what it's doing.
Okay.
I actually haven't seen this this part of the project yet. That's a different one. That one is for get value, set value, and other methods. Yeah, so this is generating the dependency properties, dependency property, get value, set value, and other methods that are related to that automatically. So
as for me, this is some of the cool stuff in the project. All the source generators and how all that stuff comes together. I always find it fascinating and how all this stuff actually works.
So Jerome is saying that the mixins are actually going to be removed in the future when it's completely replaced by this source generators code. So this is complex code, but it actually makes the whole magic work.
Yeah, no, it's all the hand waving and magic here. All right, we got off on a little tangent there. Let's go back to what we were looking at. We were looking at the
button base.
UI XAML controls, and we were looking at the button control, but it uses button base. So you told me to come down to primitives, button base, and we're looking at the WASM button here, which inherits from content control.
So it inherits all the behavior of content control, just adds what a button should do. So you have the execution on enter, execute space, like to match the behavior of a button. It's all calling the on-click event.
Okay, so where does this live?
That's probably in the shared button base file, I think.
Probably. Button base. This looks like the shared file. Yep.
And that's invoking the click event.
Okay, so let's go back to the button base. So the part that I'm confused about right now is, so all of this stuff is important. You got your click event, what to do on the on key down. But Wasium needs to eventually create like an HTML element, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Where do I see the actual UI of this button base if I wanted to make a change to it?
The thing is that in this case you have a templated control. Button base is completely templatable. So what is actually drawn is the materialization of the template of the control. And then the individual parts of the template are then drawn by some specific HTML element. I'm not sure what we can, which is some, maybe you can show it on an image control. That's a good.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be the button. I was just picking button out of a hat as maybe something good to look at. But yeah, because all this stuff is really useful that we're looking at right now. But for me, I want to see some HTML and how this is drawn, and then maybe we can look at Android and see what's actually being passed into that template. So we said head over to image.
WebAssembly, because that, as you can see, that HTML image is drawn by an image element in HTML. So that's an element that can be drawn by a single HTML element instead of multiple, like the button, which is a composed element out of multiple different views. Actually, the image, this HTML image is then used within the image there. Yeah, so that's a platform-specific element, which is not going to be used anywhere else but WebAssembly.
I'll just scroll down and look for it. Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
HTML image. I needed to just look down like 10 lines. Okay, so then we can set then it sets some attributes on it.
So it's not draggable, and then wire up the events, and then ensure that it actually displays the image. So
okay, so I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, if that's okay.
Let's go to UI element. Because this is going to be interesting for WebAssembly in this case, because UI element code should have a constructor that takes in the element name in
Let's try this one.
Yeah, that's going to work.
There we go. So let's see where are we. So we open up the UI element.wasium. So that's in XAML. So if we were to navigate by the Solution Explorer, should be down here somewhere by the letter U, UI element, and we're looking for Wasium. So this has got to be the file.
Yeah,
so
that's the file.
All right, cool. No, this is when I'm learning a new project structure. I'll use the code to navigate, and then I'll come up here and just highlight and see where is this actually live.
Right.
Okay, let's see where is it in the Solution Explorer? So next time I could just navigate by Solution Explorer. Okay, so this call, we pass in our HTML tag, and default HTML tag is a div, so that makes sense. And then we call this, which I assume goes down to the next one.
Yeah,
which does. And we pass false because it's probably not an SVG most of the time. And then this get HTML tag, I assume, okay, that brings out our string. So if we open this up, I assume it's going to create actually create the final tag. I'm not going to dive too much into that, actually. So let's go back. So right now we have an HTML tag. At this point, I assume we have like caret, or whatever our tag is, and then end caret, plus our attributes and everything else that's included in it.
The name continues. Okay. The actual creation of the HTML tag in the HTML output is here. It's calling the window manager interop, which is a WebAssembly thing that communicates with JavaScript, and then it passes those things to JavaScript to actually create it. So we can dive into that.
Okay. So I have a question
Yeah.
with that. So is and I am not a WASM expert by any stretch. I like the technology, but I do not understand the inner workings of it. And that's kind of where this question is coming from. So an Uno platform, when I make a WebAssembly project, is it every time I create a new control, is it injecting the new elements into the DOM via the JavaScript interop?
Yes. Currently,
Okay.
it's the case. There is no direct way to access the DOM from WebAssembly. So you have to go through this middleware layer of JavaScript code that does it for you. Probably in the future
Okay.
it's gonna be there. I'm not sure. Jerome will probably know more about that, but currently it's only through the JavaScript middle layer to actually interact with the DOM, and
Okay. No,
as well as the browser features like sensors and stuff. So you have to always go through the thin layer of JavaScript to communicate with that.
okay. And that's fine. That's the way to do it. I mean, the first thing that comes into my mind is, well, if we always had to go through JavaScript to add stuff to the page, the more complicated the page, the more times, the more JavaScript APIs that are called to render that onto the page. That's got to have some performance implications there. I would assume that there might be some like a bulk processing to limit that, but no, this is really interesting, and I know this kind of goes really deep into the implementation details of how WebAssembly works in Uno platform. Since we're here with the UI elements, I'm really interested in looking at, let's say, the Android implementation and the equivalent of how it draws stuff to the screen.
We can go there. Actually, Jerome says that access to DOM will be provided by some interface types that are not yet available, so that's why we're using this for now.
That makes sense, and that makes sense. Thank you for that answer.
So
And
in Android, you can see now we are deriving from something different, and that's the bindable view.
we're not loaded up. You know what? Let's load up the Android project so we can actually code navigate a little bit better.
All right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off screen. I love Android development. That's my jam. That's what I do most of the day. So I know it's the one that takes the longest to build, but it's the one I like, the one I feel most comfortable working in. So we'll save that, and I will now open up our Android solution. So that's going to be Uno UI Android only. All right, let the go button. And Android is a lot of fun. It takes longer to build, but that's okay. It's
I've been struggling with Android lately, implementing the contact picker feature, and the API for the contacts is very weird.
Maybe that's something I can give you a hand with. Maybe if we get a little bit of time after this next question, maybe we could take a look at that.
Actually, I think I have it now finished, but
Oh,
it was quite a struggle, like to get it all work properly, because it's using some kind of cursors to. First, you have to query the contacts manager to get some specific parts of the contact, and you have to run multiple queries to get, for example, phones, emails, and etc. And then you have to basically parse the column ID from the query and get the column content from there. So it's a little bit weird how it's implemented. One would expect that there will be some class that would represent a contact, and you will just take things from there, but it's kind of a database-like structure.
Yeah, I really like Android development, but if there's anything that's consistent with Android development, is it's horribly inconsistent, and you're always having 100 API calls to get something that you would think is very simple. But it's fascinating to me in the Android API structures that you can get any granular piece of data almost anywhere in the system, as long as you have an activity or some type
Yeah.
of context. And which makes it when you need to do something that when you need to get from point A to point B, you need to do 10 steps. But if you need just the middle step, you can get that data, which is interesting. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily bad or good. It's just it's the different way of doing stuff. It's always a challenge when I've been working on Android stuff and then a new release comes out and I gotta check all of the different types of platforms and make sure it's the API is available. That's where the real headaches come in.
Yeah, that's probably the worst thing about Android development when you have multiple. You have to support multiple versions and have to verify that actually those APIs you are calling are available and do not crash on the
Right.
older versions. That's probably the hardest thing.
Yeah, my that's the one thing I enjoy about the mobile development idea is we're focused on very specific hardware, Android hardware, and very specific Android operating systems, so I don't need to worry about some of those
Oh, that's
problems.
good. That's good.
Looks like we're getting some project failures here.
Yeah. That's not.
That's not what I want to see. Let's
Yeah.
head over to the errors. Let's see if we got anything useful here.
Oh, some kind of. Okay. Let's do one thing. This sometimes happens. If you stop the build for now,
Yes.
there is a special project that's in the Uno UI folder. You can go to there in the Visual Studio.
Visual Studio's frozen. Oh, there it goes.
Okay.
Okay, so what are we looking
Uno
for?
UI. There is binding help Android. This one actually, and if you can rebuild it manually, just this one, it's actually it contains some Java code. If you go into Uno, probably Uno UI, so you can see those are Java files. That's for performance reasons. It's actually doing Java directly, and that's then compiled as a projection to like you can use in the Uno UI and other projects. And
all right, so I got a question on this. And if Jerome's still in the chat, I might be interested in what he's got to say. Was there a reason for using Java versus Kotlin here? And I'd assume it'd be performance, but I was interested if you knew about that.
My idea is that probably Kotlin is not supported in this like I don't know what's the name, binding project.
Okay.
Kind of. So Jerome saying that Kotlin wasn't there at the time. It's probably not supported now.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, because this is
but
a totally
it wasn't there when
project.
it was built originally.
Oh, these binding projects are so cool.
Yeah,
I love using them. Very cool.
A lot of magic as well.
Cool. No, and and that question wasn't aimed at like, oh, you're using Java. I was just more interested.
But you can contribute and rewrite it to Kotlin.
I might do that. I'm gonna put that down in one of my notes. Write that down.
I guess that would be also something useful, as now Kotlin is the recommended language for Android development.
No, that was the thing. Like there's nothing wrong with using Java. There really isn't. But they like you said, they recommend Kotlin. So it's got some really nice syntax for writing code. I've used it on a handful of native Android projects, and I really enjoyed it over Java.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we got that built. So I should just be able to build the solution.
Yeah, let's try it again. I think that should help.
All right.
Okay, so we have now so far successful, no failures. We'll see how it goes. John Siegel is saying that the problem with Java starts with Ja and ends with Wa. But it's not JavaScript, so it's better.
There is no script at the end of it. That is true. No, and I always say whatever language you feel most comfortable in. If you feel more comfortable writing in Java, it doesn't really bother me on a project, like especially like on a native Android project. If you have some Java files versus Kotlin files, I could really care less as long as the thing works.
Yeah, that's true. It's a little bit sad that Oracle doesn't seem to be investing enough into the language development just to make it more up to date, because C# has completely overcome and is beyond anything that Java is now doing. Just like the development is ongoing all the time.
Yes.
And Java seems to be kind of stuck in place. So that's pretty sad, I think. The competition was nice.
Yeah, and C# and Java are very, very similar languages.
Yeah. A lot of similarities, and I think if those two were, evolving side by side, it would be beneficial for both of them.
Right. Well, like in Kotlin right now, I don't know. I think there's a similar feature in Java. Like one of my favorite features of the language is I can create a class as almost the same way that you create an anonymous object in C#, but it's a full class. So like a lot like in the Java and then the Android APIs, they use interfaces for everything, for event listeners and stuff. So what I do when I'm building that code in C# is I make maybe in a Xamarin Forms idea, I would have my custom renderer implement that interface and then pass this object in when I wire up the event listeners. When I would do that same code in Kotlin, I would create an anonymous class implementation right in line of that function. I'm actually going to need to step out for a couple minutes.
No problem.
I chatted with Martin. I will let you know when I can come back, okay?
All right.
All right.
All right, so we can do some Q&A in the meantime, if there are any questions or anything. I can provide that. And could we do in the meantime? Let's see. I can maybe share some of the code that was required to build contact picker for Android, because that's a lot of code. Let's see if I can share the screen here. See if it's working. So I have contacts iOS. Actually, it's not a iOS branch is now containing all the platforms, but just to compare the amount of code that's needed. So we have Uno, UWP, application model, contacts, and now let's open it here. Oh, actually, it doesn't seem it's streaming the desktop. I will do it differently. Just a moment. Okay, here. Let's see. It should be better. All right, so let's see. Contact picker. It's pretty simple. It's a shared file, but for iOS, it's basically 193 lines of code just to get the contact from the picker and go through the various properties of an contact. But it's all written in the single CN contact class, not nothing super complex. The problem, I can maybe zoom in a little bit. Zoom in. Yeah, the problem is with Android, because now you can see there's phone numbers, email addresses, and so on. But in case of Android, there is a lot of code. Actually, this is old version. I have now a newer one. But you have to run some queries, construct a query, then run it against the content resolver, and then do like moving through the cursor and get the specific properties by getString and getColumn index. So it's like very fragile. It seems it doesn't feel like object-oriented programming, but rather like SQL communication. And it's even worse when you have things like emails and phones, where you have to run a cursor and then iterate over various items in the collection. It seems quite ugly. Seems like it could be done more easily and more succinctly if they had a specific API for contacts. But the biggest problem there was actually the structured name and getting the parts of the name of the person, like the prefix, given name, middle name, family name, and so on. Because when I ran the query without the MIME type, it didn't work. And it was actually nowhere in the documentation specified that the MIME type has to be there. And it took a long time before I actually found out that it has to be done. And the answer when I found it was not actually on a Android Stack Overflow question, but on a Xamarin Android, because other Xamarin developers were facing the same thing as well. So that was pretty interesting. The fun thing is that the contact picker API is going to be supported on Tizen as well. There's a preparation for that, and actually there should be Tizen specific code there. So here we have application model Tizen contact picker extension, and it actually does the picking of contacts on platform specific way on Tizen using app control. It launches a picker and then retrieves the contact and then retrieves the specific parts of the contact. And here the API is quite simple, as it just takes from a specific record different parts of the contact. And the most interesting part of this is probably the WebAssembly support, as contact picker is now a draft API on WebAssembly as well, or on in the JavaScript world. So if I go here and contact picker glitch me, there's a demo for contact picker. It's not working on Windows. It works currently on Android only, but the implementation of the feature as an experimental feature is available in Chrome as well as in Edge. And it actually uses, if we go in to implementation, there is a new contact manager API. Doesn't seem, yeah, here we go. So probably here there is contacts and contacts manager. And using these, it can actually retrieve a contact that the user picks and then retrieve the various parts of it, like name, email, telephone, and so on. So that's pretty cool. As in the future, we can actually build a application that has a contact picker and have it as a WebAssembly application running on the phone. And so the in progress code is here. It's actually calling the JavaScript method pick contacts, which I have implemented somewhere in the not here, but in the UI folder. TypeScript, and here Windows, application model contacts. Let's see. Let's move it here. So far the implementation looks like this. It's probably gonna be a little bit extended, but the main part is here. So like pick contacts, I choose the properties I need to retrieve. It allows even multiple contacts to be picked, and then using navigator context.select, I invoke the dialog that allows the user to select the specific parts of the contact. All right. So that's good. The good thing is that actually contact picker is supported async method that allows you to check if the contact picker is supported on the target platform. And so it's pretty simple to actually do that check in JavaScript to see if the contact picker types are available and if the given browser actually supports it on the given runtime platform. So thanks to this, I don't have to worry about people using the contact picker API and not actually having access to it in their application. Right. Andrew is still away, but we can maybe see. Let's see what's coming soon. So there's a lot of new features incoming to Uno platform. For example, drag and drop support that's being actively worked on by the team and community actually. There's going to be drag and drop support for applications, and that's including dragging things from other applications and from outside the application into the window on macOS. So that's pretty cool and long requested feature. I think it doesn't yet include support for drag and drop in lists, but that's coming later afterwards. Oh, hello.
Hey Martin, I'm back.
I will switch back to your screen because I switched to my display for now. All right, display capture. Yeah, good. So let's go back.
Sorry, I had to run out there.
No problem. Good.
All right.
I can see your screen.
Perfect. I was in the middle of saying something, wasn't I? I don't even remember what I was saying.
Me neither, actually.
All right. Oh yeah, I was talking about the
Dan
Kotlin,
is saying
anonymous functions.
Sorry, just a notification that Dan is saying that Prism 8 is now stable and available on NuGet. So that's advertising.
That's great.
Download it, everyone. It's very good.
All right. So we were looking at the binding helper Android stuff, and we were talking about how that was in Java, and we just got the Android project to load or to build with no errors, which is good. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look at how the UI. So we were just looking at image for Wazin, right?
Yeah.
So if I go under UI, XAML,
controls.
Is it under controls or primitives? Controls. And then there was image and then image.android. All right, I'm getting better at navigating this.
Yeah, it helps that the structure is the same as the Windows namespaces.
Yes.
At least that gives you a rough idea where things are.
Okay, so what I'm most interested looking at this is what's the actual native control of the image that's being rendered. So that's some Android opening logic. Create native.
So that's the native image. Let's go there. I think that's going to be the... Yeah, so you can see it's an image view.
Okay.
Behind it.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, and this might be specific to image, but I would assume we follow a similar pattern across our different controls, is so we have some type of control at the top of this page, right? So this is an image control, the UWP, so it's Windows UI XAML controls image. Now on Android, that image control which can be used in our XAML or C# inside of an Uno platform project, is a wrapper around not only the image view, but we typically, it looks like we're typically creating some type of child class. So we had where was that native image? So we have this native control here, which is native image, and this is a child class of our Android widget image view.
Mm-hmm.
So and I guess what I'm verbalizing here is the actual image class doesn't necessarily store a direct reference. It is because it is the parent, but we have an additional helper class here or child class that gives us a couple extra objects that we're going to need. Um, it seems like this is kind of our standard way of doing stuff where we have our shared control, and then inside of that we have some type of uh, child implementation of whatever that platform specific class is that were referenced inside of our shared control.
Like, it's not necessarily the case for everything. This is probably most for the primitive controls, like the image
Okay.
or I think border maybe. No, but probably not that one. Um, Text input probably uses the native input
Okay.
element underneath, and there is text block probably uses UI label, or I'm not sure what's the name there in Android, but only for those primitives you have the actual native control underneath. But for the more complicated controls, it actually usually derives from content control or control, and which are then rendered using a specific template that's composed of multiple different primitive controls. So
Okay.
only those very simple controls have this structure. But if you go to, for example, grid,
You said grid?
grid,
Yes.
so
Okay.
that's a layout control. It actually doesn't have a visual representation itself. It actually does the layouting of other views that are inside of it. So
That's actually a good explanation. Let's take a look at how that is all
yeah,
connected. Am I in the right
that's quite
file?
complicated.
That one's quite complicated. Okay, we won't look at
Yeah.
that one.
Um, the layout controls are quite complicated. So you have to factor in not only the UWP layouting, but also layouting of the specific platforms as well. But if you go to maybe let's go to ui.xaml.generic folder. There's generic folder somewhere. Not here. It's on the same level as style and generic. And there you have generic XAML. And this one actually is basically the same thing as on Windows, the default templates of controls. And if you go, for example, to the button, as we were looking into it previously, you search for target type equals button. Yeah. So we have that's delete. Let's go forward one more. You should find the default style for button there as well somewhere. This one. So there's a default button style, and as you can see, there's a template which contains a grid. Then inside of the grid, there's probably a lot of other things like the Visual State Manager that takes care of states of the control when you click on it or have a pointer over it. And there's down there a content presenter that actually surfaces the content itself. Yeah, so that allows you to have a button that contains, for example, an image, which is something you have an issue to do when you have. I think in Xamarin Forms previously was just a text property that allowed you to put in some text, but you couldn't put there some stack panel with the icon and text or something like that.
No, that's something that's been historically pretty difficult in Xamarin Forms. In more modern versions, in like the 4.x builds of Xamarin Forms, they've come a long way with being able, like there's an image button now, for example, and it's they have other techniques out there that make it a lot easier. But historically, yeah, it's been very difficult, and you were usually always writing custom renderers.
Yeah. So that's maybe that's partially the answer to your question on what's the equivalent of renderers in case of UWP. In case of UW and Uno platform, you have usually a template that contains and composes of other smaller controls, and you always define the look of your control using those templates, and it's completely customizable. That's the advantage, that you just provide the behavior of the control in the control itself, and then the looks of it are defined by the template and are completely replaceable by something else.
All right, cool. This is actually this is a really good concept. I wanted to talk a little bit more about because this is something I've actually struggled with in Uno platform development. So when we define our styles here for, in this case, the XAML default button, we have our general properties, background, foreground, and so forth. But when the template here is really where we can start customizing it, which is why we don't necessarily need to build the equivalent of a custom render, because we can just update that styles template to draw however we see fit.
Yeah.
And this is where that pixel perfection value proposition, I think, comes into play. So in this case, we just kept it very simple with a grid and then the content presenter, which then binds all of those style properties here. If we wanted to, we could expand this out to have multiple grids or stack panels or additional controls and bind those out accordingly. So there's really no need to have a custom render, but if we need to still think of in the like of a custom render, it would be our control template.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the advantage of the controls that are in Uno platform and UWP, that they usually are not just a single control underneath, but a composition of multiple. And that's the difference also from Xamarin Forms, where we have when most of the controls are backed by a platform specific control, and the resulting control in Xamarin Forms is intersection of the features on all the platforms, so you are limited by something that is not available on all the platforms.
That makes sense, because when you build a custom render in Xamarin Forms, you said it's an intersection of all of the different features. So if like corner radius has been something that has not been available in a lot of different controls. There's libraries out there that you can get corner radius and drop shadows and stuff, but out of the box, it's been something very difficult because corner radius is not available in all the native implementations. In Uno platform, we would just create a custom control template and wrap everything in like a grid or something. Yeah, a grid that we could just apply our corner radius in. So, has there been any concern about what that means for performance? Because to generate a control, you might need to render several different controls. And I was interested if you had any opinions on what that means for performance.
Like, there's definitely some performance impact if you have a complex template, especially when you have it in a list view, for example, and you have a huge structure there. But the point is that we are trying to optimize things as much as possible to be fast.
Gotcha.
The layouting especially, that's a very key feature to actually have the performance as good as possible. And as a result, the less time it takes, the less you will have to care about how much controls are there. But you can also simplify those templates if you don't need some features or just need some simple visuals. You can definitely have that as well.
Right. So like if a platform controls it has features that you don't really care about, and you are and you're very performance minded about your app, which we all should be, you can rewrite the control template to only draw exactly what you want. And now I'm just kind of thinking, I'm digging at this feature a little, because I do like this feature a lot. And so like if I really wanted to, I'm just gonna write some pseudocode here. Hopefully the editor doesn't yell at me. Let's say I wanted to come in here and say Android I don't remember the exact button name, but let's say we wanted to do, or we're doing buttons here. So we wanted to draw just the native. I could do something like this if I wanted to. I know this isn't the exact object name, but could you do something like this inside of the control template?
Yeah, you can definitely do. If you search for the Android colon prefix, you should probably find some of those as well in this file. Yeah, for example, here we have some specific template for Android and iOS. Yeah, for example here.
Okay.
Yeah, so some differences are there. And
not Android.
yeah, so if some feature is available on some specific platform, you can use this platform-specific XAML to access it. The native, there's actually, if you go to the generic native XAML, Jerome is saying that there are actually templates that are using the native controls. You can see there Android button style. There is native default button, and it contains bindable button, which is from Android, and there is bindable UI button. So there are actually styles for various controls that are using the native controls underneath, and you can use those if you want to actually use you have your application look like a native application.
That's right. I remember watching the video with Jerome about the Surface Duo, where he was able to switch between the WinUI styles and the native styles in Android, and my face was just like, what kind of sorcery is this?
So it's just this, like switching between styles at runtime.
And when I first saw that video, the first thought in my head was like, that can't be possible. They must be just rewrote the Android implementation and rendering that to make it look like Android. And this is really showing me that no, it is actually running the native controls. So that's really cool. And you could just swap those out with your control template. That's a really powerful engine there.
Yeah.
I know that's not necessarily about developing to a platform contribution, but this is really cool I really do find it extremely valuable, whether you're going to contribute or just trying to dig around in a project to understand some of this stuff. It's not necessarily a thing that every developer needs to do, but I think it's valuable to understand how that stuff works. So as you develop a new feature for the platform or for your own project, you can make educated decisions of, well, I know this template is actually using a couple different controls and we're only building this on iOS and Android. Maybe we can just swap it out for the native implementation and style from there, and that might be faster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
So, it definitely helps to look into the source code, even if you're just using Uno platform. When you want to see how things work underneath, it really helps to understand how to use it properly. And even though I'm contributing for over a year now, I still find a lot of things that are new for me in the source code, because I usually move in specific parts of the project, but it's super huge. So there is a lot to it.
This is a large project, and the advice I give people about contributing to open source is, even if you don't make a pull request or even create an issue, if you start looking at a project source code and you get into the weeds with it, you're like, man, this is just going to be too hard for me. That's okay. And because I've heard the complaint of, well, I don't want to spend 3-4 hours looking at source code and not have anything to show for it. And what I usually tell to people is, well, now you have cardinal knowledge of all of the stuff that you looked in on that project that not everyone else on your team at work has. Right. And when someone asks a question about, hey, how does this work? You understand, you can bring that valuable feedback to your team and that valuable understanding of maybe this isn't the right feature to use. And I never think going into an open source project and not actually generating a pull request is time wasted. You always learn something new. For me, today, this has been so helpful to me. I'm really getting a really good understanding of the different parts of Uno platform, and I hope people in the chat are learning something too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. Like, open source is a great advantage of providing you the chance to actually see what's going on underneath. So, and if you have some issues, you can even then make better issues in GitHub. when you actually know what's going on underneath. So that helps. Yeah.
We've only built it on or ran it on UWP. I want to try running it on our Android emulator. Let's take a look.
Yeah, let's do that. But now we have quite some time before the builds.
Yes.
So,
so I think we answered my big question of the day, which was how do we, and I just want to recap it a little bit, was how do we get from the equivalent of a Xamarin Forms custom renderer to what it would be in Uno platform? And it's just what we talked about. It's you create a control template, and if you want to go native, you use your XAML platform specific statements. If you want to make it a composite control, you just use the WinUI or the UWP controls, and it's that simple. You don't really need to have all of those different classes. I guess my only follow-up question to that would be if I wanted to create my own control that had a native experience versus shared experience, it's more or less the same way where I would create, let's say, your UWP user control, and then I would apply the control template to the style of that user control, right?
I'm not sure. I understand the question. 1 second, please.
So let's say I had a custom user control that had some properties on it for us. So let's say it was like an entry field that has text, like a label above it, and then it had the actual text input control. That's a common control I've used for building mobile apps. And your bindable properties might be title or label, and then your input, let's say. And if we create that as a composite control, with the UWP inputs and labels, that's fine. But if I wanted to make it really native for the different platforms, I could apply a control template to that and then specify out the implementation inside of that control template. Would that be a fair statement to make?
That's definitely a way to go. If it's something more complicated, then definitely the template is the easier way to implement it. If you have just one single control, for example, if you had let's say map control, and you want to use the Google Maps control on Android and some iOS Maps control on iOS, then you could probably have a single shared class that would be, for example, map control, then have native implementations, and the map control could derive from content control, and you just place the native control inside of the content of the control itself. Basically, surfacing the UI as a content of the control, and then create some properties or methods that would then be implemented platform specifically for the specific controls that you are using underneath.
Now, would you still be able to create those specific controls in the XAML, or would it be more? I'm trying to think of a good way to ask that question. Is there good? Do you think? Is there any controls that we could look at that would kind of give us how that works?
Maybe
think of. I'm putting you on the spot here.
In the Uno UI project, WebView, I would say WebView is a good example, because WebView has to be implemented using the native WebView control. So let's go there to see what's it doing. So WebView. So we have WebView. So it's here is again using the native WebView class as a backing control.
So the way that I'm understanding and the way I'm kind of visualizing this in my head is the WebView class, it would be similar to, it would be like an abstraction class in a Xamarin Forms custom renderer, where the native view would be the actual implementation of that custom renderer.
Yeah, the actual native control on the specific platform.
And the difference here is it's not all shared because we have WebView, Skia, WebView, Wazium to handle some of the platform-specific stuff at a higher level. And then the native WebView, if I'm understanding this correctly, is just going to deal with generating the actual native controls that get rendered on screen, right?
Yeah, I think so. If you go inside of the implementation, we can see it to confirm. Yeah, so here it's just very simple.
Very simple. Yes.
Yeah.
I like it. So let's go look at WebView .Android. So this implement or inherits control from WinUI, and then we have our actual WebView is this. There should be a native.
Yeah, well, actually, probably uses template. I think it uses a template that has the native WebView inside. That's on apply template. So that's how it's working. So it's searching for the WebView control inside of the template.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's Jerome is saying it's in the generic native XAML as you have seen before. Gotcha. So there is a style for WebView that actually uses the native there. WebView.
Search for WebView.
Native WebView, maybe. Or WebView.
Native. Let's just look for WebView.
It's not there.
Maybe it's in the other one. Well, I still would be in there because that's generic native. Like we're looking here.
It's probably somewhere else. It should be somewhere. I've seen it. Yeah, this one. Here we go. Yeah.
Native WebView. Okay. So this is kind of what I was getting at earlier. So this is actually a really good example to pull out of a hat. Is we have our style for the WebView, which is just all WebView. If I'm reading this right, not net standards. So pretty much everything but net standard. That targets a WebView. So it doesn't have a named style. So pretty much anytime we use the WebView, it's automatically going to come in here and grab the native WebView. So if we go to that definition, which it won't let me do.
Yeah, but basically these types.
It's going to go to, this is a partial class. So it's going to go to whichever native WebView we have based on that platform. So if we wanted to write our own implementation of WebView, we would just create our own control template like it did here, and we could plug in whatever controls or series of controls we wanted to do. If we wanted to have some type of wrapper around the WebView that put our company white labeling on it, we could just update that control template and then still use that native WebView to update it that way. So that's useful. So I like this because in the way I'm thinking about it in my head. So we said the WebView is our shared abstraction code. Then we have our native view, and then we have these control templates which are defining our actual UI itself. And we have the flexibility to make it an advanced UI or just a very simple UI.
Right.
It says it's starting the debugger, even though we had some errors there. Anyway, cool. Well, thanks so much for explaining that. That's I think, and for me, that's been a very big missing piece of how does that make sense? How does it compare? And it's really apple and oranges when you really get into the details. But it's useful to understand that the concepts are still solving a similar problem.
Correct. Right, it's loading. There's a lot of things the debugger does.
A lot of things load. All right, cool. So
we're running. Yeah, that is the same thing again. Complete the same UI experience basically, just running on the phone. And yeah, so let's go here. So good. And you can even switch to, there is on the top on the right there is FL checkbox. If you switch it on and now go to a different page, you should see the new if you go to back page. And for example buttons, you should see the rounded corners on the controls, which is using the new Fluent style design.
Oh, that's okay. Can we? Is there one of these buttons swap it out for the native styles here?
Actually, the button down there, that's the native style.
Oh, there we go. Native
Those are the
style.
native Android designs.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I missed that.
Yeah, Jerome is saying that you can just use the refresh button next time. Yeah, there's a refresh button on the top, similar to F5, so we can refresh the page when something fails. It's also useful in that case. So yeah, so that
Yeah,
works the same way.
This is really cool. This is I'm really loving this.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is useful seeing the native styles versus the UWP styles. And you said if I uncheck that, that's no longer fluent.
Yeah. So you
So
see
is that going to be?
crisp corners there.
Gotcha. Yes.
Yeah, actually, and now Uno platform has as well the material style support, which is not in here. You cannot test it here. There's a separate
Sure.
separate repository for material design, but you have also the option to switch to Android-like styles, and those even contain the animations like the ripple when you click a button and it ripples from the place when you clicked and so on.
Cool. So I know we're bouncing all over the place here with understanding the project and such. So if I wanted to set up a project to have everything be material or fluent, is that just like a one line of code at the beginning in like the app XAML, or is that something you need to set up as far as like a global styles? Like how would somebody go about that?
We can see it maybe on the GitHub page. Let's go to
Yeah, let's
GitHub,
head
and
back over.
there is a repo for material. So if you go back to Uno platform, the main repo, go back to Uno platform as a organization, and there should be Uno platform material somewhere. This one, Uno material.
Oh, there.
This one. And there is probably maybe on the main page there's README, and
Let's
that
check the
should be it.
README. READMEs are good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what you have to do probably to get it running. Defining some color schema, but there is basically setting the material styles resources.
Okay.
So yeah, based on this tutorial, you can easily get the
That's not too
material
difficult.
design there. There is a lot of steps, but some are optional, and
Right.
some there are, for example, using the Roboto font, which you don't have to use if you don't want it, but
Right.
it's a possibility, an option.
No, that's useful to have. That is well, that answers that question. Cool. So trying to think of other questions that I have on some of the stuff that we've looked at. This is with the material and fluent, and then we got native. Is the Uno platform team looking at doing any other type of styling there? Is there like the thing that just kind of came to mind is looking at the Uno material here. Is this seems, and I know it's not the same at all, but in my mind, I'm starting to compare it to visual in Xamarin Forms. Is there a concept of that the Uno team is working on to make it easy to implement your own styles, or is it going to be, because this seems like it's not that it's a lot of work, but if I was to tell you, here's my branding guide for this enterprise app that we need to build, and we need to make sure everything looks right, I would then start creating the style. Okay, so here's what the button's going to look like. Here's what a primary button, a secondary button. Here's what our main page is going to look like. Here's the standard background and secondary colors, and it would be very similar to how you all implemented the Uno material. Is there any type of framework that's going to be that's being looked into to make implementing style guides easier? Because this seems like right now, looking at this, it seems like it's would be quite a bit of work to implement your own style guide.
Well, if you use the material design, you can adjust the colors and such here,
Right.
right in the application global styles, and it's gonna work. But if you wanted to implement like some kind of own custom UI design, then you would have to do it one by one, control by control. For example, if you wanted to have a visual style that's the same as in iOS, the Cupertino-like thing, and then you would have to probably do it manually if someone else hasn't done it before. To make a custom template for button, custom template for text box, and so on. So
well, that makes sense.
That will be some work, but the advantage is that it then will work across all platforms, not only Android and iOS as is on Xamarin Forms. When you have visual, it works on those two platforms, but the UWP supports this kind of not really complete yet. So when you do this here, it will work on Android, iOS, WebAssembly, Skia, Tizen, whatever, everywhere, automatically.
Well, that makes sense. And your advice of starting with the material steps here, I think is really good because it gives you good building blocks of here are all the colors. Here's how these different parts are implemented. So you have the components there that you just need to change for your style guide. So that's good advice there.
Francois is saying that style guide is already provided in the Zeppelin file. It is a Zeppelin design file that's provided with this Uno material repo somewhere. Probably, if you go down in the README in the header, maybe that's what. Or there's a sketch file
there.
Okay, maybe that's.
I don't know. I mean, I don't have Sketch installed on my computer.
But the good thing is that when you use these material design resources in your application, then all of the code that you write will use those default styles for buttons and so on. So things you actually then write will look correctly based on material or Fluent Design or whatever you choose. Yeah,
there's that one link. That. So let's click around. Okay.
Yeah, the goal is probably to match the material design from Android as much as possible. So it should be almost the same.
Right. Oh, this is...
here with the material design, you can see there was a bottom navigation bar. If you go up a little bit, the bottom navigation. So that's basically the top bar on the bottom that you can find in many Android applications.
Right.
That control is not available in UWP. When you use Uno Material, you have it available, so you can use it across all platforms easily.
Oh, okay. So if we head back to the material project, so there's
that's a good idea. Actually, Francois is saying that we can go to the gallery, Uno gallery, to see it in action, and that's what we should probably do. Let's go to a new tab and type in gallery.platform.uno.
Gallery.platform.uno. I'll bring that screen on here.
So that's a sample application for Uno. We have it across all platforms, including WebAssembly, and then we have macOS, Android, iOS version as well in the source. And there you have examples of both material and Fluent designs in one place. So you can try it out. If you click on a button, that should do the rippling animation, like this, yeah. and this is the
I
fluent
love
design.
that.
So you can,
So like bottom
yeah,
navigation is a component. So there is no fluent
because there is
equivalent
no
to this.
control for that, but you can see that in material you have this exact the same experience as on
And we got
Android.
the badges support too. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. And we got the floating action button. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is so nice. So I can just set up my Uno project with material, and I can do everything. This is nice.
You can even expand the code. Francois is saying there's a on the right side there's a button. You can expand the source code for that specific sample.
Oh, yes, I love this. So this is actually the best part of our live stream is looking at this, I think.
It's very cool, and you can even switch to dark theme there on the left side above the menu. There is a switch, so you can go to dark and see the dark design of the controls.
Come to the dark side.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this application will be expanded as we go with new controls and even showing some of the non-UI APIs like sensors and so on. So it's really a complete showcase of what you can get from Uno.
Okay, so this is one of those ones where we need to make sure we include the material XML namespace.
Yeah, because it's some rules specific controls, also the bottom navigation bar and so on. Those are in the uno.material library, so you'll have to use the prefix there for that.
I gotcha. Very cool. I think this is another thing that's just really useful. I like it. A lot of poking around today and finding different things about Uno that I did not know were there.
And that's ideal. I think that's
cool.
why we're here.
Right. So, and this is all in the Uno material project.
Mm-hmm. All of these controls as well as styles.
So, like, if we looked in here for the bottom navigation bar, it's probably a very complicated control, but let's just take a peek. So, and this is something that you could just reference as like a NuGet package, I assume.
Yeah, that's a NuGet package, and then you just add the material XAML prefix referencing this uno.material.controls and use it on your page.
Very cool. And then I'm just poking around like I do. So this is it might be easy. I might need to actually clone this repo. What do we call it? It's bottom navigation bar.
Yes. There is a XAML part of it. If you search for there is styles controls. Yeah, this one. That's the template for the control.
Okay. And the control seems just really a grid that you've styled up.
Yeah, probably. It seems so. I assume it generates the columns for the grid and puts in the buttons, or not sure exactly how that's implemented there, but...
Well, it's like a button. Buttons are always simple, until they're not.
No, they're actually not, because the button itself has the ripple animation as well. So I assume, ripple controls ripple. So there's a specific control that provides a rippling animation.
Right. It's just okay. So the button's not that simple.
And if you go to uno.material.controls/bottom navigation bar, that's the source code of the navigation bar itself. Not here, but you're in the styles. So if you go to material above the styles once more, there should be controls, and there is bottom navigation bar and the item itself. So those are the items which are in the grid then.
Right. We can specify, and these are all the bindable properties.
And you have the badge there, as well.
Right.
So that's probably that has another template as well. So if you search for bottom navigation bar item.xaml, that's going to be the template for the individual items in the navigation bar.
We look for the badge.
That's just the badge itself, but the bottom navigation bar item, if you search for that, then you should get a bottom navigation bar item.xaml. That's the template for the items themselves. So that's again the ripple for the ripple animation, and then the badge, the label, and so on.
Badge container.
Yeah.
Right there, and then okay. Very
So
cool.
it's nicely composed of simple elements that are in the template.
And this keeps going back to my original question of how do you do custom renders in Uno platform, and this is just it. Like, and we're looking at a lot of different ones here where we've just looked at the CS file, which defines all of our bindable properties, and now we're looking at how we're actually rendering, and it's a composite control. And for material, it's using our different WinUI UWP controls, but implementing it and styling it in a way to make it look like material.
Yeah, the styling is the replacement for renders. You don't have to do any platform-specific renders usually. You just use templating and styling that you would normally use in UWP, and you don't have to care about platform specifics.
Oh, this is good. This is really useful. I knew there was stuff on material. I just haven't taken a look at it until now. So this is I might actually use this in my next project.
You can actually have platform specific styles using the conditional XAML. That's Francois saying that you can do that as well. So if you that's going to be probably also interesting if you go back to the Uno platform core repo, to the Uno platform /Uno. There is it's actually on the docs page, but we can go to docs here. Go up a little bit, or doc. There's the home for documentation, and in articles, this is the source that then is rendered on the Uno platform website.
Right.
But if we go to getting started, I think that's gonna be where it's there. No, not there. So articles, Uno development, probably, and there should be platform specific XAML. So search for XAML, maybe.
Oh, what did I do?
Oh, jumped.
I had a different hotkey.
XAML. So not here. Okay, so one step back, or like this.
Well, let me do it like this. Maybe docs/platform specific.
That
actually worked.
XAML,
I did not expect that to work.
Surprisingly, it did.
I love the T button on GitHub.
That's very useful. So that's it. So this is the documentation for the platform specific XAML. And when you go down, there is a table that describes all the platform specifics, and there are namespaces. So you just declare the namespace in XAML and then surface those platform specific controls there.
Right. Very good. This is useful to have all those namespaces available. I remember before it was not always uno.ui.
Yeah, so the good thing is that it then works even in the UWP project. It doesn't break anything. So,
right.
So you have it, the UWP project just ignores those, and you can use them in Uno.
Right. Because otherwise that would cause lots of problems when you build the UWP project.
Right.
I think that was one of the complaints I've seen is the first time people get started with Uno development and they load up the XAML editor, it's got all sorts of red squiggly lines because the tooling sometimes does not like having Android or iOS in there.
Yeah, the trick is, if you can go to Visual Studio, I can show you. The trick usually is to just switch the target platform. We are actually now targeting just Android, so it's not gonna actually work. If you go to the XAML, some of the XAML pages, on the left side, above the file, there is a drop down that usually says the target platform. Now, not now because we are in the Android specific, but otherwise there would be a drop down that will say Android, UWP, iOS, and so on. You just select the target platform and it will display properly according to the target. So when you're using Uno, you usually want to have UWP there to see the XAML code actually without the squiggly lines.
Right. This is the
one.
thing.
So there is now only Android because we are targeting only Android, but otherwise there would be also UWP, and you would select it and get rid of these errors.
All these squiggles, yes. All right. Well, we are a little bit after 3 o'clock, so I'm gonna need to get going in just a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm. So, any last questions or?
I think we've gone through a lot of the inner workings of the project that most people would want to look at their first time through. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have any other questions right now or things that I really want to dive into.
Maybe one more thing I can show you before we end this.
Yeah.
There is in Uno UI and Uno Foundation, there is always a generated folder. And in this generated folder, generated. Yeah, this one. Yep. If you open it, there are all the namespaces in that specific part of Windows runtime code. And you can see there all the types that are defined in UWP are there. And maybe Uno UI Uno UI will be more representable than the Windows Foundation one. Let's go to Uno UI and generate it. Sure. So here you have all the namespaces, and inside of the namespaces are all the types that are publicly available in the UWP API surface. So if you open anything of those,
let's find a good one. Maybe style.
Yeah. So you can see all the already implemented features of style are marked as skipping already declared property and so on. It's a partial class, so the implementation that's actually then used is the one that is implemented in the project itself. So there is a style class somewhere in the project which is also partial, and then it is composed of those implemented parts and non-implemented parts. And for example, you can see that is sealed is not yet implemented, so that this property just throws not implemented exception if you attempt to use it.
So this is similar to the contribution that I made last year, where there was, I think it was on the command bar, there was something that was not implemented, and the code we're looking at right now is 100% generated. But it at least will let the developer that's trying to use this know that it's not implemented by throwing the exception. If I were to go and implement the is sealed property inside of style, the code generator would run, and then this would no longer be here.
Exactly. Correct? Yeah. There is a project, not in this, probably in this solution filter, but in the big one, in this Uno UI solution, there is a project that syncs the API interfaces between UWP and Uno, so it makes sure that what is implemented already is removed from these generated files, and if there is a new version of UWP and there are some new classes, then it actually automatically adds those as well into the generated folder.
Gotcha. So if I wanted to, if I wanted to an easy way to contribute to Uno platform? Why don't we end on this note then? So if I'm a developer and I want to find an easy way to contribute to the Uno platform, and I see a control that I use and I get a not implemented exception, and I think I can go and implement that, I could go into this generated folder and see that control with the generated exception being thrown. I can then go and implement that method or API in the different versions or the different platforms, and I wouldn't need to change any more code here, but I could submit that pull request implementing that behavior. That would be, would you consider that, obviously depending on the complexities there, but would that be a low-hanging fruit new developers could go down?
Actually, you have to edit this file, or either run the source generator to generate the file again, or mark the platforms where you implement it as false here. As you can see on the top in the file, there is a £if false, 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 because the style is implemented everywhere. But the property, if you were to implement it, for example, on Android, you would just put in £if instead of the £if Android in the property.
So we could do like something like that.
It's underscore Android underscore
that's
underscore.
right.
So if this was there, it would mean that this style class is not implemented on Android. So if there is false, then it's implemented. And below that, you can see the is sealed property is not implemented anywhere. And if you were to implement it on Android, you would just replace the Android marker and with false. So you have false there. Yeah, the source generator would do it for you, but if you don't want to run it, you can just edit the file manually like this, and then implement the feature in the actual source code. Yeah. So and if the class itself is not implemented at all, you can just copy the full generated code, paste it there, remove the ifs and so on, and implement it yourself.
Gotcha. This was something that I didn't fully understand when I was submitting that pull request last year.
Yeah, so that's how it works. Yeah.
Cool. This was a good. I think this is a good thing to go over and a good thing to end on.
Yeah. All right. There was a lot of things. I think we went through a lot of covered a lot of ground in the Uno solution.
Yeah, this is fun, and I do agree with you. There's a lot of poking around we did.
All right. I hope that this will be helpful not only to you, but also to the people who are watching the stream or the recording. As this is the place where you can start when you want to contribute to Uno platform, or even just browse the source code and see how things are working.
Yeah.
All right.
Is there any questions from the comments that we need to answer before we get off?
Probably not. No questions.
All right.
All right. So
thanks again for having me on your live stream here. This was.
I thank you, because it was very helpful, and I hope that we will see some pull requests from you soon.
Yeah, I got a couple things written down. I think I might take a look at updating some of that Java code to Kotlin, see how difficult that is.
Yeah, that would be definitely nice to have.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so if you have no other questions, we can probably finish the stream, and I hope to see you soon in some other live stream. Maybe if you have some feature you want to implement and you want to do it live and to have some support during that, you can definitely ping me and we can do it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'll now that I know more about how the Uno UI project's built, I think we can do that next time.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
All right.
Bye
Bye
bye.
now.